Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I would like to take a look at the balance between ground troops and spaceships in Star Citizen, how they interact, what weapons and vehicles ground units have available to address airborne threats, and what inspiration can be taken from real life in terms of doctrine. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the armory. If you would like to support my coffee addiction, check out my channel memberships or my Patreon. So for this video, let's consider the following scenario. You have a ground facility that needs to be defended from an airborne assault. This will likely be the case for many battles in Star Citizen, with notable exceptions where attackers will deploy ground troops away from the target and attack over land. A good example for the airborne threat scenario is the Jump Down event. You have a group of players holding a ground location and they'll most likely be repelling attacks from the air. Now, the first thought that comes immediately into my mind is to set up an air patrol. Have ships in the air orbiting the location ready to address any incoming threats. There are some limits to what both sides can bring into the fight. The atmospheric flight model doesn't play much of a role yet, but it will eventually impose more restrictions. But for now, we can tell that the defending team will have to pick ships that are lighter and can stay up longer and respond faster, while the attackers can pick heavier ships and even large ships like the A2 that can tank out the damage from the defenders. The main reason is that the defenders will be in the area for much longer, while the attackers can launch and complete their attacks in relatively short time, unless they capture the objective, in which case they need to have a sustainability plan in place. But for the sake of the video, let's say that your air patrol is not available. It could be destroyed or be busy fighting some other enemy. What tools do ground troops have available to them to defend themselves? Let's start from the basics. We have two handheld weapons that are capable of striking air targets at close range: the railgun and the missile launcher. These two weapons have a relatively short range, but can be very effective against low and slow flying targets like dropships coming in for landing or fighters making strafing runs. And they can also be used to fight ground vehicles. In real life, handheld air defense systems are mostly missile-based, with a notable example being the US-made FIM-92 Stinger or the Swedish RBS-70. But in recent years, electronic-based anti-drone weaponry has also made an appearance. Having these heavy weapons equipped by our ground force gives you a nice backup option to support other vehicle-based defense platforms, which we're about to cover. Going by size, the smallest vehicle-based anti-aircraft platform in Star Citizen is the Cyclone AA. Putting aside the fact that the Cyclone AA missiles never worked, at least for me, Cyclone AA carries 4 size 2 missiles and supposedly has an EMP generator. This gives it a lot more capability and mobility than handheld launchers. However, it seems that to aim it you have to move the whole vehicle, which is not great. But once it works properly, I think it will be a good lightweight option to enhance your anti-air capability. However, they're plagued by the same issue as all vehicles in-game, but I will get to that later. A real-life equivalent would be a vehicle-mounted handheld missile launcher. They offer the same mobility increase at the cost of increased detectability, but all of these platforms had the missiles mounted on a rotating turret, which is something the Cyclone AA would benefit from. Moving on to larger platforms, here we have the Anvil Atlas platform and its variants, the missile-based Ballista and the gun-based Centurion. Let's start with the Ballista. The Ballista has 8 size 5 and 2 size 7 missiles mounted on the turret, which gives it up to 30 kilometers of range assuming it can see the target. A real-life equivalent would be the S-400 or the Patriot missile systems. Though these offer a longer range, we have to keep in mind that Star Citizen is not one-to-one scale. Overall, the Ballista provides you hard-hitting firepower at long range, but that comes at a price. Size 5 missiles are too large and too slow to hit smaller targets. This is subject to change, but larger size missiles are very easy to evade or countermeasure, especially at range, even in larger ships. This is where the Centurion comes in. The Centurion features 4 size 4 guns mounted in the remote turret. It has a very short range, only about 2 kilometers, but this makes it very suitable to engage small targets trying to close in. A real-life equivalent would be any close-in defense system like the Phalanx. And that covers the tools and vehicles that Star Citizen players have available on the ground to defend themselves against air threats. Now, all of the vehicles have one major problem right now, which I believe will eventually be balanced out, which is that they will be detected at a fairly long range by the incoming attacker, which puts you at a disadvantage. For the Ballista, this is not that much of a problem, as it can also fire at long ranges, but for the Centurion this is a major problem, as for now weapon ranges are more or less similar, meaning that the light and medium fighters that the Centurion is supposed to fight have more or less the same weapon range, which means that if the Centurion can shoot them, they can shoot the Centurion. Now, in modern militaries, air defense platforms rarely operate alone. Usually they create networks in which they can support each other. They also utilize some kind of an integrated air defense system, or IADS, which allows different units and platforms to share data about targets and coordinate striking multiple targets from different platforms. Star Citizen doesn't and will never have this, as this is a very complex system on its own. However, a well-coordinated group should be able to share information about incoming targets and coordinate striking at these targets. Which brings me to my first conclusion. Being on the ground and trying to fight targets in the air is not a fair fight. It was never meant to be. At the same time, a single ballista or Centurion won't make a difference. However, a larger, coordinated effort can make attacking an area very difficult. This means deploying multiple ballistas to provide long-range radar coverage and heavy firepower, and multiple Centurions to protect your ballistas at close range. You could also add ground teams or Cyclone AAs that are able to move between defensive positions to reinforce where needed. This gives you a fighting chance, but it seems that for now, until changes to radar and detection range are implemented, the best way to defend against ships is to have your own ships flying patrol. My second conclusion is that deploying ground-based defenses is difficult and requires coordination. For example, if you wanted to deploy 4 ballistas and 4 Centurions to an area with no vehicle spawn, you would need 4 C2 or M2 Hercules, which creates a logistical challenge, especially when speed is the key requirement. However, coordinated groups can pull this off without major issues. To summarize, is there a lack of balance between ships and ground units? Yes, absolutely, but this is by design. However, ground troops have way to equalize this difference. Also, sometimes just the presence of a ballista or a Centurion will make a pilot think twice before flying through an area. In this scenario, the pilot is in much more danger and has a much more difficult task when attacking a ground vehicle. They have to focus on their attack while evading fire and flying their ship. Meanwhile, all the Centurion gunner has to do is point and click and hope their shields hold. CIG seems to be committed to balancing, so I think eventually we will see a decrease in detectability of ground vehicles and an increase in their range, especially for the Centurion. With that being said, that's it for tonight. What do you think? Are ground-based AA platforms completely useless, or are they just missing adjustments to detectability and range? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.